Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. I've entitled this particular podcast, No Regrets. No Regrets because I was thinking about something in the context of, I have a dear friend who is in the hospital and is not expected to live a whole lot longer. And I wanted to do it as a tribute to those of us who have experienced life and have on the occasion had somebody disappear from us, and we feel obviously that sense of loss when somebody we care about is no longer with us. And in my particular case, I wanted to share that I call it No Regrets because my friend, his name is Daryl and I we've had a lot of fun together, musicians. We've done various projects, and it's been fun to perform and to rehearse and, be a roadie. And for those of you who may not understand the music jargon, a roadie is a person who basically moves the equipment, your speakers, the wires, all of the gear. The musicians are the guys that play the instruments, and then the roadies are the ones that kind of set up all the stuff and make it look nice and make it sound pretty so the musicians can sort of grab all the credit. And I say that lovingly. Well, we did lots of fun things together, and I enjoy the fact that I was present enough and had the kind of people in my life that I could enjoy those kinds of things. And if having fun is missing from your life, then I want you to find something that you enjoy and people that you can enjoy it with, because it's in creating memories. It's what's really going to mean something to you when your time is up. Because life is a timeline. We know when life starts, but we don't necessarily know when it's going to end for us. And having the opportunity to reflect on the experience of others who have lived a life, this is some of the wisdom that they've imparted upon me, which is to do things, have fun. Life isn't always going to be what you imagine it to be. Sometimes it can be better than that. And learning to be open to those possibilities makes it even more fun. And I know it's hard for some of us to give up control about those things because some people just want to plan out everything. But I say be flexible because, as I just shared, it could sometimes turn out better than you ever imagined it could be. And the one thing that seems to be a recurring theme for us human beings is that when we don't take chances, we oftentimes regret the fact that we didn't give something an effort. And that can apply to life's experiences as much as it would apply to maybe the people we have in our lives that sometimes we may have disagreements with. Now, my friend Daryl and I, we were buddies from the time we were playing keyboards and performing in bands. And I would say, thankfully, we never had crosswords between us. And I also found him to be a very endearing person. He was very philosophical, and we really learned to think out of the box a long time ago. And he shared some things with me, in which I treasure. But as I was relating to when it comes to people, and if you're having difficulty with people, then it's important that you find a way to bridge the breakdown of communication. And it's worth doing because having those disagreements when, on your mind, when you can no longer say I'm sorry or let's bury the hatchet, that weighs on you. That's going to be something that you would regret. And find ways to make peace in your life with the people that you have difficulties with. It's not always easy, because oftentimes doing those kinds of things means that you have to face yourself and maybe face whatever it is that you bring to the problem. But that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity to make things better for you. It's an opportunity to make change. And I encourage you to take it on. Like I said, it's not easy, because when we see ourselves as humans, we also see ourselves as we make mistakes. We say things that we may have a hard time wanting to realize that we may have said them, that they can hurt people. But we also have to learn how to forgive ourselves, and we learn to forgive others. And it helps put things back in place. Now, I'm speaking very philosophically here, because but I want you to get the point, and I want to encourage you to be that person, because you may have to be the one that makes the first move. Because quite often we tend to sit back and want somebody else to make the first move. Well, and we do it in all kinds of ways. We might say, well, they're older than I am, and they're supposed to be the adult or the parent or the older sibling or something like that. And we say, well, we'll wait for them to make the first move. And that probably starts because as a child, you are told that you have to wait and let the grown-ups make the decisions. Well, when you get older, sometimes you realize that the grown-ups aren't always that smart. And when it comes to forgiveness and love, anyone can make the first move, even you. So if you feel like you're a step beneath someone else because of some sort of status thing, just put that aside. When you're trying to share love, it's worth taking a risk and being the bigger person, because it might be just that is what it takes to get things moving. So just understand that I support you 100%. So let the love shine. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. So, what makes a great relationship for you? Is it that somebody's always there to listen to you? Somebody draws you out? You're able to have fun with that person? Is it the mutual trust thing? Is it the intimacy? There's that powerful chemistry that goes on when you're being really intimate or in someone's personal space like that. Like I say, the mutual trust, what makes a great relationship? And having spoken to some people just to get their input, because I like to talk to people, one of the things that I discovered, it's feeling supported. It's knowing that you have somebody that has your back through thick and thin. Because we go through life being an individual. And that can be very scary when you make all your decisions and wondering sometimes if you've made the right decision. Having someone in your space, in your corner, who you can share your intimate thoughts with, that think things out, somebody who's willing to listen to you think out loud, and someone who's willing to accept you for who you are and understand that you are not perfect. These are the kinds of things that help make a relationship great for you as an individual. Finding somebody who's willing to be there. Being able to focus on each other, that's another trait that really works when two people are being connected, or somebody that you want to be connected to, having the capacity to do that and knowing that they have it for you. That makes it powerful. That makes it desirable. Having intimacy, and by intimacy, it's not just the sex, but it is really about having, like I say, somebody who has a listening for you, meaning they get you, they understand you. It's not always that people have the capacity to want to embrace you for who you are, or who are willing to kind of sit through experiences to figure out what you're like, what your likes and dislikes are. When somebody has the capacity to do that for you, see, that feels wonderful because you feel accepted, you feel embraced, you feel loved. That is what helps make a great relationship. Like I said, no one is perfect. I think we all see our own flaws. We all have a mirror there. So whether it's how we look in the mirror or how we feel about ourselves, because we know that we make mistakes. And we all grow up with some sort of insecurity. And being able to share those kinds of thoughts with someone else, being able to say, hey, I feel really insecure when I have to face XYZ situation. And being able to bounce that off of someone and to know that they get you, they understand that, and they encourage you, they support you, they're saying, you know what, you're actually better than you think you are. So go out there and do it. And I'll be here if you fall. See, that kind of support, that's what helps make a great relationship. So if you have missed any of those things in the past, and now I'm able to help you put words to it, write those things down. Because there are lots of experiences that we have in life by ourselves. And isn't it interesting that when we meet somebody and we start talking about things, how sometimes when we really get a good connection with someone, it's because a lot of those things are very similar. And that creates a really good chemistry, a really good connection, a really good foundation for wanting to build on. But ironically, when we were going through those things, we never imagined that there was somebody else that was nearby that was actually experiencing that. But sometimes it's really funny when you connect with somebody and they've had the same sort of experience. See, that helps make a great relationship. Remembering to have fun and enjoying each other is very critical, because our lives become so busy and so caught up with responsibilities that it's really nice when we find somebody who will help us get outside of ourselves, get outside of all the heaviness of life, because life is serious enough. Sometimes it's so serious, it's scary. And we need to be able to disconnect from that, because when we stay tuned into that, it's exhausting and you have to recharge in some way, shape, or form. So someone that you can have fun with, that's a person that you can let your hair down, you can express yourself, and do things that you don't ordinarily do, because we all have routines in life. And sometimes the routine is being a caretaker, just having to go to the job, wash the car, put gas in the car, do the grocery shopping, preparing food, all of these things that we do every day. And to be able to disconnect from that, or to feel, and you know what, sometimes we don't feel that we can give ourselves permission to disconnect with that. But if you have a partner who says, hey, just put all that aside, we can get to that later. Sometimes that's what you need, just to be able to bridge the gap of being able to help yourself let go. See, those are the kind of things that make great relationships. And being in love, that's deep. It takes a while to get there, because the love part of a relationship, that really important emotional tie that's a very vulnerable spot for all of us. And, there's so many of us that avoid going there because we worry so much about, well, what happens if it doesn't work? Oftentimes, relationships really get stuck. They get stopped right at that crossroads because we don't know what to do if it doesn't work out. Well, there are a lot of things in life that we don't necessarily know the answers to. But what I can tell you, because my very first part of this podcast was about no regrets, what I'm going to share with you is sometimes you have to go through those shadowy parts because it is a risk, because you are vulnerable. But that's life. That is a part of life. And it's never been any different for anyone. How we experience ourselves sometimes is very scary because when we're left to our own ideas about what we think life is, sometimes we're shocked to realize that we don't know it. We don't know it all. And we want to, and we think maybe we can read it in a book or we can pray about it or a lot of other things that is going to necessarily give us the answers. You have to live it. And when it comes to the love portion of this, you have to take a risk. Yeah, you're going to have to risk getting your heart broken, but it also helps prepare you to recognize when somebody else is doing the same. I'm not saying you're always going to see it, but it helps prepare you to recognize when somebody else is putting their effort into it too. That's a person you want to be with. Somebody who's willing to risk it with you. Because we're human beings. We're not out here to be alone. As often as we see people who tend to do things solo, which isn't to say that you can't do things by yourself, but I'm just saying many of us realize at some point in our lives doing it with someone is more important than doing it by ourselves. It helps create memories. And the wonderful memories that you create can help create more memories. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of something new. It's the genesis of something. Relationships do that. And, underneath this thing, that we call a relationship is the word trust. Trust is foundational to having a good relationship. So what is trust? Trust, I'm going to give you a textbook definition. A firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. That's the definition of trust. Given that we live our lives with questions about everything, because we have a lot of insecurities, and certainly having faith and trust in another human being is real dicey. We all get a sense of that because we've all been betrayed. We've all been let down at some point. So I think what we try to angle ourselves to do is protect ourselves, protect our heart from being let down again. And finding someone who you can rely on is a difficult challenge. See, the irony is oftentimes we give people a pass because of other things that we're attracted to, be it their looks, be it the sound of their voice, be it the flashy car, material possessions, things like that. We tend to look at people through that paradigm and say, well, they must be trustworthy because they're successful in some way, shape, or form. But what I want you to consider is not those things which are very magnetic. They get a lot of attention, but it's really looking at the person underneath. You can learn to trust someone who's not so self-absorbed, who is able to focus on someone else as much as themselves. See, that's the giving part of this, and they will be open to receiving. Because you know what? Interestingly enough, as much as you might want from somebody else, it's also the ability of them to be able to receive your love and your gifts. Because imagine what it would feel like to get rejected when you try to give your attention, your time, your affection to someone and to not have that received. You see, that's an important part of being in a great relationship, is the mutuality of these traits. You see, I'm going to have to take a break, and I'm going to come right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we're back. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. As I had ended the last segment, I was talking about the mutuality. And this is very critically important. When relationships don't have balance, when they get out of balance, then it's kind of a different word I would use in this case would be like smothered. You know, when one person feels smothered and the other person feels like they're having to give. And it gets really awkward. It gets kind of creepy feelings sometimes. And relationships go through those ebbs and flows. And I mean, it's probably more creepy when something starts out and the person is just smothering. And I think we've all experienced something like that. But if you've already been in a relationship for a while and things seem out of balance, then it's worth having a conversation about what's happening. You know, what are you experiencing? What am I experiencing? And if you feel like you're working really hard to try to get something from your partner and it's not happening, you got to call a timeout and say, "Hey, look, I'm feeling like we need to talk because I'm not getting enough at the moment." And you kind of want it's okay to say that, but it's also important to get your partner's input and to listen. Maybe they're not giving. Maybe it's because something's wrong. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're sick. Maybe something. But that's okay. Because remember, we have a great relationship. And we can focus on each other. We can be supportive. We have mutual trust. So we can talk about these things. And at that point, we're relying on all of these healthy things to work through the challenges in a relationship. See, that's why it's important to have those particular traits, because you're going to need to fall back on that in order to keep building and growing and trusting. And I would say that for anyone, if you're looking for someone to be in a relationship with, think about your past. Think of the important kinds of things that you want to have in your relationship and make that as part of your quote unquote, your questionnaire, your interview when you're going out on dates, trying to figure out who you want to be connected with, and you want to listen for their answers. I mean, I talk about this in some of the other podcasts, that you definitely want to interview your potential mate, your potential partner, because you want to know a lot about them, because you're going to put a lot of trust and a lot of care, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of concern into them. Remember, you know you, but you're going to have to find out about them. And this is why You're going to want to listen for their answers. I know it's fun to talk about yourself. It is a lot of fun to talk about yourself because you have so much you want to share. But remember, the reason you want to be a listener is because you want to hear their answers and their responses to things. You want to know, because that's going to tell you something about their experience in life and their ability to communicate. You see, this is part of the master plan here. If they have a difficulty communicating their characteristics, their traits, while you're in that interview part, while you're in that dating part, you can't necessarily expect that it's going to take a big leap the minute you become a couple, so to speak. Because most people show you a lot about who they are if you will pay attention. And I'm suggesting that you pay attention. You ask the kinds of questions. Because remember, we're talking about how when the relationship has been going on for a while, you're going to be falling back on these traits and these characteristics. And here's an interesting thing. If you find that there's some weaknesses, then you can work on those together. Actually, you can make that a part of what you do. Now, that's not the same as, let's say, you taking somebody that's a fixer-upper and then trying to make them into somebody they aren't. Because they may not agree to that. But I'm talking about this part where when you are figuring out who your partner is, because you're doing the dating part, you're trying to figure out, you're developing your communication style, you can learn to do things together. And if it's personal development, see, that's great, because then you guys can both invest in something that's important to each of you and to the relationship. See, that's kind of neat. Because remember, you're going to fall back on all of these characteristics at some point in time in the relationship. So let's say you have those things in place. I say use them. Fall back on them. Learn to trust. Like I say, it's not always easy. Because remember, relationships are work. I don't care what anybody tells you. Relationships have always been work. It shouldn't always be drudgery. That's the sign of something's wrong. But it's work because we're human beings, because we're fallible. We make mistakes. And sometimes we both make mistakes at the same time about each other and about ourselves. And it leads to some rocky roads, but the good times are ahead. That's why we focus on each other. Remember to have fun and enjoy each other. Support one another. Remember, we've got that mutual trust. And these are the kind of things that help make a great relationship. So you see how that works out? No regrets. I'm John Johnson.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.